Alright, so hopefully that video gave you a nice review of a lot of the psychologists that we've talked about while we were back in school, and then also was a nice review of classical conditioning, and then gave you a pretty good idea of how operant conditioning came to be. So we're moving on now to types of reinforcers. So we really have two main types of reinforcers. You have positive reinforcers and you have negative reinforcers. And I'm sure that this is not a new concept to any of you. We've all experienced behavior at some point in our life that has been reinforced in a positive way. And we've all experienced behavior that has been reinforced in a negative way. So let's just explain the difference here. So a positive reinforcer is when something is given as a reward after an action is performed. So basically this is an action that you want to reinforce, that you want to continue to happen. You provide positive reinforcement in the form of a reward. It encourages that same behavior. A negative reinforcer is when something unpleasant is taken away if an action is performed. So if that's a little bit confusing to you, something unpleasant taken away, well, let's look down here at this little cartoon. This explains it pretty good. So for every day that your math grade stays below a B, your father will post a video of himself on YouTube. So this girl is being embarrassed by her father because her grade is below a B in math. So when she raises her grade above a B, the unpleasant action of her father posting videos to YouTube will be taken away, and therefore the grade is reinforced that getting a grade above a B in math is important. Otherwise, you will end up with your father embarrassing you. Alright, so those are two types of reinforcers, positive and negative. Positive, reward given; negative, something unpleasant is taken away. Alright. There are also two types of each of these reinforcers. So these can be primary or they can be secondary. So primary is something that would satisfy your biological needs, like hunger, thirst, or sleep. These would be very, very strong reinforcers if it's something that is a need. So like you watched in the video, the pigeon hitting the disc was being rewarded with food, which is a biological need for the pigeon. Therefore, the pigeon's going to repeatedly keep doing that because it needs the food, and it knows that hitting the disc is reinforcing that behavior. It's a primary reinforcer. A secondary reinforcer is paired with a primary reinforcer, and through classical conditioning has acquired value. And it has also acquired the ability to reinforce. So an example of this would be money. We know that we have to work and we get paid, and the money that comes along with that is the secondary reinforcer. All right, I'm going to show you a short video, which I don't have here on the PowerPoint, but I think it's helpful because it explains these different types of positive and negative reinforcers. And the girl doing the video explains it, she calls it IRL, psychology IRL, in real life. And that's always helpful for me because if I can't apply it to my life or something I understand, then I have a difficult time grasping it. So I like this video, and I think it will help you grasp these different concepts of positive and negative reinforcement a little bit better. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that up for you.
Welcome to Psych IRL, and today we're going to be talking about operant conditioning. Let's review classical conditioning. So classical conditioning is the association of stimuli. Meet Bob. So Bob hears a song, he doesn't think it's bad, he doesn't think it's good. All of a sudden, Bob meets Linda. They fall in love and they get together. Linda gives Bob this happy feeling. One day, Linda says to Bob, "Hey Bob, we should totes make this song our song." He agrees. And so now every time that song comes on the radio, it gives him a happy love feeling. So in summation, the song gives him the happy feeling because it's related to Linda. Classical conditioning. So if you're still confused, check out a video I did in the description. I talk about classical conditioning more in detail. But for those of you that do get classical conditioning, let's move on to operant conditioning. E.L. Thorndike is known for the beginnings of operant conditioning, but it's more associated with B.F. Skinner. Classical conditioning and operant conditioning have a difference. In operant conditioning, the subject has a choice to respond. It actively does the behavior. But in classical conditioning, it doesn't. In the Bob and Linda example, Bob doesn't choose when to be happy or when to be sad. Definition of operant conditioning. Operant conditioning is a type of learning in which the organism learns through the consequences of its behavior. B.F. Skinner made this device called the Skinner box. The Skinner box was a device used to teach animals and modify their behavior. Now, Skinner put a rat in this box. This box has a lever, a bowl, and a closed chamber. If you pull the lever, the chamber opens and it dispenses food. But of course, the rat doesn't know this information. So being a rat, it walks around and accidentally it hits the lever. The rat notices, hey, there's food in my bowl, and it takes the reward. After a few more of these accidents, the rat notices that every time it hits the lever, food comes out from the dispenser. Eventually, the rat learns, if I pull this lever, I get food. So let's break down operant conditioning. Operant conditioning can be divided into two categories, reinforcement and punishment. Those categories can be further divided into positive and negative. Reinforcement is defined as something that strengthens the behavior. Reinforcement can be positive, and positive reinforcement means the addition of a positive stimulus, and that's what you see with Skinner's box. The addition of positive stimulus is that it gets the food. So how does this apply to humans? Operant conditioning, IRL. In elementary school, we had spelling tests every Friday. Now, I hated these tests, but I knew if I got 100% on these tests, I would get $1 from my parents. So the behavior was spelling each word correctly and getting 100%. And the addition of the positive stimulus was getting the $1. The reinforcements can also be negative, and that's the removal of an unpleasant stimulus. So back to elementary school. I actually went to a Christian elementary school, and we were made to memorize the books of the Bible in order. I'm still waiting to use that in real life, by the way. Same thing with proofs in geometry. Anyway, back to my story. My dad would not stop nagging me. He nagged me until I did this 3 times perfectly. So the behavior I had to learn was to learn all of those books in order. And the removal of the unpleasant stimulus was that my dad would stop nagging me. Operant conditioning also includes punishment. Now, punishment is used to reduce a behavior. Punishment can be positive. And positive punishment is the addition of an unpleasant stimulus. So I have these 2 younger cousins, which are twins, and they were over for a birthday party. I was in my room, and in my room I have this lamp that gets really hot. You touch it, you get burned. One of the twins comes in my room. I tell her not to touch that lamp. She touches the lamp. Her sister comes along. I tell her the exact same thing. In the end, they learned not to touch the lamp. The heat or pain from touching that lamp was the addition of an unpleasant stimulus. Punishment can also be negative. A negative punishment is the removal of a rewarding stimulus. Now, I was never negatively punished. I was mostly positively punished. So an example of this is when some kid does something really, really bad, and he or she gets their phone taken away. They learn that doing something really bad results in the removal of a pleasant stimulus, or their phone getting taken away. If you want to learn more about operant conditioning, I'll leave a link in the description. That's the end of the video. If you like it, give it a comment, thumbs up, and subscribe. Bye!
All right, so we're going to go back to our PowerPoint here. All right, hopefully that helped you. I thought that was a pretty informative video, nice easy way to explain the difference between positive and negative reinforcement and punishment, which we haven't quite gotten to yet. So now we got to move into something called schedules of reinforcement. So reinforcement can be done in one of two ways. It can either be continuous or it can be partial. So continuous reinforcement is ongoing with a reward given for each time that a positive task is done. This does not always produce long-lasting effects. Conversely, there is partial reinforcement. This occurs intermittently and it teaches us persistence and it has much better results. All right, so when you look at these different types of schedules of reinforcement, they can be given in two different ways. So they can either be fixed, like we said, continuous, or they can be variable. But in addition to that, they can also be a ratio or they can be done in intervals. So you can have fixed ratio or fixed interval, or you can have variable ratio or variable interval. So if you're confused, don't be. We'll get to it in the next couple slides. So here's your four basic schedules. Fixed ratio, this would be a specific number of correct responses is required before a reinforcement can be obtained. An example, a typist is paid by the number of pages completed. She completes X number of pages, she gets paid. She does 20 more pages, she gets paid $10 more. 20 more pages, $10 more. It's fixed, it's a ratio, she knows what she has to do and when she will get paid. Conversely, look at a variable type of ratio. This is an unpredictable number of responses that are required before a reinforcement can be obtained. Slot machines. Again, the reinforcer here is money, but in this time, we don't know how many times you have to put your money in the slot machine before you are going to get paid. So it's a variable ratio. All right, so there's the difference between fixed ratio and variable ratio. Moving on from here, you have fixed interval and variable interval. All right, so the difference here is an interval, fixed interval, is a specific amount of time that must be elapsed before a response will elicit a reinforcement. So cramming for an exam the day before a test, but studying less immediately afterwards. All right, so you cram, you cram, you cram, you have the test, and then after the test, not really going to study so much because I'm not going to have another test for another week or two. All right. Versus the variable interval, these are changing amounts of time that have to elapse before a response will obtain a reinforcement. For example, you're desperately trying to get a hold of your friend, but every time you dial, you're getting a busy signal. You're going to keep dialing and dialing and dialing until you get through. You have no idea how long it's going to take you to get through or for how long it will take for your friend to answer. But you're going to continue dialing and continue dialing until you get through. All right, here's a cool little video of the Big Bang theory. I would highly recommend that you watch this. It's really funny, and Sheldon is using psychology and reinforcement on Penny through the use of chocolates to try and encourage behavior that he thinks is good behavior or behavior that he wants to see in her. And it's working, and it's hilarious. So check that out if you get a second. All right, so let's put some of this into practice. Let's see. Out of these four images, can you label them? Fixed ratio, fixed interval, variable ratio, variable interval. Which one do you think is which? Go ahead and pause the video, take a second, and go ahead and figure it out. All right. So now that you've had a chance to look at that, just to review, ratio schedules are based on a number of responses, where interval schedules are based on time. Consistency is the key to effectiveness for all of these, all right? So it also is not on this slide, but it goes without saying, the variable type of reinforcement is also stronger than the fixed reinforcement. When you don't know when it's coming, you're going to keep trying harder and harder and harder because you don't know the next time could be the payout. versus the fixed interval, you know it's not coming until you get to number 20, and so I'm not going to try so hard when I'm on number 1 and 2. All right, so variable is stronger